last 2.5 days, we've been converging here in Nairobi for our programming conference and General Assembly. This is a conference we do every 3 years. In accordance with our constitution, we bring together our membership, which is from all the 55 African countries across the continent and the diaspora, to look at our strategies, to look at the state of the women's movement and what we can do collectively.
The programming conference of FEMNET is a really cornerstone with reference to how we promote gender equality and women empowerment, and how we engage all the networks across the continent in different thematic areas about political, social, economic empowerment of women. And the sessions have really showed us that how we from different parts of the African continent, from all regions, are having challenges, but also we are having the roadmap for our women empowerment.
I come to this meeting because I attended the Beijing meeting with FEMNET, and I really like the organization. So the spirit in here, but mostly the Pan-Africanism in it. It's a pleasure for me to meet my fellow African women feminists and to see the wonderful work that they do. And in Mauritania, we are really lagging back a bit. We don't still have a law to protect women and girls from violence, so I really seek to learn from their experiences and how to do a better advocacy for us to have this law and how to make it applicable in our local context.
We have come here to strategize, not in isolation, but together, because these concerns are collective.
So it's so important for us as women's rights organizations, as networks, as individual feminist activists to come together in solidarity, to come together, especially at a time like now when we know that there's a lot of things happening in the world, there are a lot of crises that are happening, there's dwindling funding for women's rights organizations. So coming together allows us to prioritize what are the issues that as a movement we can push collaboratively, collectively together. It helps us to be able to strengthen our resolve to continue fighting against the discrimination that we are facing. It also helps us to strategize on the ideas that are needed for us to weather this storm, where what sort of resources can we put up together, what innovative ways can we actually start looking at to ensure that we survive as a movement, we keep pushing as a movement, and that we are able to harness our power in everything that we do.
Some of the issues that have come up in relation to women's economic justice and rights are the nexus issues in terms of how financing actually affects financing women's issues from sexual reproductive health rights, climate justice, environment. We do know that a lot of women in the continent actually work in agriculture or are cross-border traders who do a lot of farming. We've seen how climate change has been able to impact that. We've also seen how financing has been restructured and deprioritized for women's public services, and we've seen how that has impacted women on all the different facets of the different programmatic work that happens in FEMNET.
It was very timely for FEMNET to hold a PCGA at this particular point, because as women rights organization working to end violence against girls and women, and also working on sexual reproductive health issues, we need a healing space. This was like a healing space. Having been, the backlash has hit them so hard that they needed where they could come, exercise solidarity, get back their power. Get that, being reassured that yes, we are moving on in big numbers and across the continent.
Some of the key issues that have been discussed in this meeting in regards to women in leadership is the issue of women representation, and also the kind of space and engagement that they're being given. Oftentimes, we know that women are there, quote unquote, as flower girls, but we are now moving to a place where it is not just them being present in the spaces, but are they being engaged meaningfully.
I'm excited to be here because for the first time, a lot of emphasis is put about climate justice. First is the fact that Africa is now really struggling with the effects of climate change. We know that we are the least contributors, but we are the most affected. And because we are in a convening of women, we find that most of the women are the most affected with climate change. One is because they depend on the livelihoods that are very vulnerable, like agriculture, like mining, like forest livelihoods. So the convening is very key to us as African women. One is because we need to put our voices together. We need to find solutions. We need to tell our narratives about African women and what they go through in terms of climate justice.
The issue seems the same because at the end of the day, they are all human rights issues. However, they are mutating in different spheres, different perspectives. For example, you'll realize that women rights organizations in Central Africa right now, there's a lot of war. The same as in Horn of Africa, there is a lot of war, and this is really affecting everything else that they are doing. And the bad thing is that women's body are being used as the weapon for war. Then you'll also see the pushback of women in leadership in Southern Africa. We have 2 countries currently with 2 heads of states from Southern Africa who are women. But then we see that pushback of the world questioning why did they get women into these positions. As far as we are seeing different stars, different color of it, but at the end of the day, it is the same thing. It's the same rights issue, and it's the same women demanding to have space, demanding their power, demanding to have solidarity to gain their space that they ought to have been. Yeah.
Economic justice and rights is a key pillar. I wouldn't say even a key pillar for FEMNET. It's a key pillar for everyone, men and women, because everything revolves around money. But what people forget is that it's not exactly about money, it's about livelihood. It's about be able to afford the things that you need to be able to afford. It's about not necessarily subsidizing where the government is supposed to actually be able to provide for you. So the global financial architecture and also the regional financial architecture, which trickles down to the national financial architecture, is all a cycle that feeds into everyone's component. And if we don't talk about money, where the money comes from, who the money goes to, and what the money does, then economic justice is not going to be a key critical pillar for everyone.
As part of our General Assembly and Programming Conference is also having leadership renewal. So I'm also expecting that we'll have a new board that will also take FEMNET to higher levels, that will ensure there's accountability, will ensure that there's oversight of our policies and the work that we do across the continent.
For me, especially as the first diaspora rep for FEMNET, I've had the opportunity to connect our members with funders and resources in the diaspora, but also connect some of our members with cross countries that are doing similar projects. So I think for the incoming board, being able to continue to be that resource for our members is what's going to be very important, especially in the timing of funding. Funding is a huge issue, and so in order to actually overcome that, we're going to have to work together in partnerships and collaboration to move past that.
We have the power and we have the futures, because with the futures, we've never departed from futures.
some of the key takeaways from the 2025 programming conference as far as transformative women leadership is concerned is that we need to move away from, not really away, but we need to progress from policy to actions, because in most of our spaces we are always talking about these policies, but at what point now do we transition from it being a policy to it being an action? And this is definitely in regards to the formative actions that have been put in place, in various women and decision-making spaces.
Yeah, something interesting that came out from this convening as well from the PCGA is the issue of artificial intelligence and what women should do. And specifically looking at climate justice, I think we were challenged as women in Africa to embrace artificial intelligence, because we've seen artificial intelligence being used for predicting disasters. They've used for mapping out resources. So, the challenge that came out from here is that how do we then integrate artificial intelligence in our work, and especially in the climate justice work?
From the conversations here in terms of way forward is that first and foremost what we need to be able to push for political will from the governments and the policymakers, because they need to be able to want to take care and protect and fulfill the rights of the women of the continent. The second thing which has really come out here in terms of looking at the way forward is that it's very critical for our policymakers to be able to understand why it's important to have a gender lens on matters and to be able to have a sort of gender perspective and why it matters. It's not only about a heteronormative perspective of men and women, it's about why an elderly woman would need specific things when it comes to care work, as opposed to, for example, childcare, looking at it from all different facets, as opposed to, for example, a woman who's abled differently, and looking at it from that intersectional and gender perspective, which a lot of government policymakers might not necessarily have, is critical. And then we won't be discussing some of the issues we've been discussing here today. They will be able to actually be able to make policies which include women from the get-go, because they've been thinking that way.
I think it's time for people to think innovatively. Skill building is important. Policy making and changing policy is what's really important. It's great to have funders, but you should also try to have money for yourself. So starting a business, so that means taking vocational skills or training skills or technical skills. Those are gonna be the key things that build the infrastructure in these countries. And so that's the big takeaway. We can't rely on funders to fund things, especially when it's not coming from within the country and coming from others.
Our takeaway, all of us, that we have the same challenges, and again, we have the same route and the same roadmap to go. So we are carrying the torch, and we are engaging the youth to carry the torch with intergenerational dialogue, and to see how this torch comes from one generation to the other, to make sure that we have the same goal, the Africa we want.
FEMNET, we are going to continue to be bolder in the way we do our work. We are going to also do a lot of work on solidarity, having a very strong regional agenda to see how we can use the Africa frameworks, work with the special envoy on women, peace and security who's incoming, because we've really heard that it's a priority for our women, looking at how we can continue pushing and fighting for the oppressive, systematic and structural violence that we see being meted on women, on communities, on the environment. So you can expect FEMNET to be bolder, to be louder, to be bigger, and to continue fighting for women's rights until we get to gender equality.